Welcome to the non-dual lectionary for Palm Sunday in Year A. We are back to Holy Week. And last year, we walked through Luke's account of Palm Sunday. And then on Maundy, Thursday, there's a reading from John. And on Good Friday, there's a reading from John. And our recorded videos for each of those. I will link all of those in the comments because today we have two readings suggested. One is the Palm Sunday triumphal entry into Jerusalem, Matthew's account. I'm not going to do that one. It's very similar to Luke's account, and so just refer back to the video from last year about Luke's account, and again, I'll link that in the description. And then Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday, the readings from John from last year are the same for this year. The readings from Year C are the same for the readings from Year A. So I will link again the Year C Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday videos. I think those cover some good stuff. I'd encourage you to watch them again this year. But what I'll do today instead is the other alternative reading for Palm Sunday is actually Matthew's account of the Good Friday story. So what we're given is the triumphal entry according to Matthew, and then also Matthew's account of Good Friday story. And we're given two options for that, a longer one and the shorter one. So I'm going to talk about the shorter version of Matthew's account. It's, I think, useful actually to read that next to John's account, which is again is the reading from last year and this year for Good Friday. As I talked about in last year's video and the Year C video, John really presents Jesus as like, realized being, spiritual being, right? And so we have, like the embodiment of true nature or, non-dual realization walking through the Good Friday story in John's account. There's some beautiful stuff that comes out of that. But what we miss a little bit and what you get more in Matthew, as we'll see, is a little bit more of Jesus's humanity, a little bit more of the nitty-gritty. In all of these stories, of course, right? What we've got is the arc here. And I do want to pause and highlight that again, right? So what we're going to see from Matthew, we have the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, the sense of arrival, in the spiritual path, the sense of realization, or, like we're here, we've got it, everything's going to be kind of good now. The Maundy, Thursday into Good Friday and into today's reading is really, everything is falling apart, right? The full death, death of ego or death of self, but the death along the path, right? If, as Richard Rohr says, every religion in some version teaches you must die before you die, it's not subtle here. There is the full death, and it's not an accidental death, right? It's a stripping away of everything. Everybody's mocking and okay, we'll get into that, but just everything falls apart and ultimately dies, and there's no good there. There's no apparently redeeming quality, and this is important. And this is one of the things we really get out of Christianity, right? If we really wrestle with it, is here's who Christians profess is the embodiment of the divine in the world, right? The Son of God, who dies, who loses everything, and is therefore, the divine is there when we're in it too, which is really powerful if we really embrace that. And then we get to Easter, which we'll talk about next week. But let's start with Matthew's account then of the Good Friday story. It is Matthew chapter 27, verses 11 through 54. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." Then the people as a whole answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then two rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants to, for he said, 'I am God's son.'" The rebels who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now, when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man was God's son." So again, there's some commonalities in all the Good Friday stories. Some of what I talked about in the Year City video on John's account, but I do want to highlight a few things. Again, gleaning out those non-dual nuggets, right? The whole story, again, so rich. But even from the outset here, right? We have Jesus, at least, refusing to play the game, I think is a good way to put it, right? Jesus is embodying true nature here, right? He has that recognition. And so, are you the King of the Jews? Instead of, this is begging for a yes, no in a debate, and he just cuts through it all, right? You say so. And then more accusations, he just doesn't address it, right? Because he's playing a different game entirely, which, that's part of it's just highlighting, right? It's Jesus is manifesting true nature, and what does it look like here? Sometimes it's playing the game, right? But walking through it in a different way. And here it's just stark, right? He's just not playing the game. But what we have from there, right, is Pilate trying to find a way through, the people abandoning him, the people calling for him to be crucified, right? And then Pilate handing him over. And again, I think part of what this speaks to, right, is the sense that the spiritual path, right? When Jesus again embodying uh, that recognition, that no self, that death of self, if you want to call it that. Um, what are you promised from the world for that? From people in power, from people around you? Nothing. You're promised nothing. And that again, like what does that present? This huge test of the realization, right? Of what does it mean? Are you really there? And all of the, given opportunities to explain yourself or to step back or but still walking that path. But what is it? What do you get out of it? Not necessarily anything for yourself. And then what we have, in particular, in comparison with the John story, right? Matthew here is we get, the human Jesus having to walk through this, right? Um, even if we fully, even if we see in the Jesus story, right, a fully manifested, realized non-dual recognition, um, it's still a human having that recognition, right? This is the beauty of the Christian doctrine of fully human and fully divine, right? In the same place. I mean, one is the promise that that's what everything is all the time. That's just a statement of what is. But Jesus as manifesting that consciously, right? Um, in John, we get more of the emphasis on the divine nature. Here we get the mix, right? And so we see Jesus as a human being walking through this, right? So he's getting flogged, he's handed over to crucified, right? He's mocked and he's you know stripped of the being beaten and everything. I mean, this is awful. And so we don't shy away from that in the story, which again is one of the contributions of like Christianity to the description of like the spiritual path here, right? Because it really gets into the emphasis, if we can see this as modeling of the path, that yeah, we're promised nothing. The human part of you is not necessarily coming out of this great. So what's that mean, right? And when we get to the crucifixion here, right? His clothes are divided. He won't drink the wine. People are, now here too, right? It's all you would have destroyed the temple, save yourself. You can't even, you say you're God's son, all of that, right? Because this is the contrast between the people around having a dualistic view of what it means to embody true nature, right? Like if you are really the son of God, right? If you could embody non-dual recognition, then you should be able to save yourself, right? That's a dualistic, like if I see everything from the perspective of a separate self, then that's what you should be able to do if you are a divine separate self, right? Um, and so we have that like it's just a great example, right? Of like this is what the dualistic view looks like in that. And of course, so everybody is taunting him, right? Priests, scribes, elders, people walking around, the people being crucified next to him. This is different from John's account too, right? Um, but we really emphasize, and what is you can put yourself as a separate self in this position, and how awful, right? I mean, the torture itself, but it's just nothing. Nothing is coming here to say like, oh, you're being supported in any way. Your separate self isn't being supported in any way. And again, that's that James Finley statement of God protects us but from nothing, but unexplainably sustains us in all things. I mean, he's just got it right here. But then what we have, in Matthew here, but not in John, is Jesus's humanity shining through in the midst of still not backing away from uh, from his divinity, from his recognition of true nature, right? So we have to me, the non-dual, really, crucifixion here. John is great, and again, I'd encourage everyone to watch that video if you haven't. But John is great for emphasizing the divine part, the part we often miss for ourselves, right? Because we're often walking on in our separate self perspective. But what we get here is, Jesus as human as well, right? The non-dual, the separate self is part of it also, the illusory separate self, but still operating in the world amidst the recognition, right? So, my God, why have you forsaken me? and then crying with a loud voice and breathing his last. This is not a Jesus who is put his humanity aside, right? Who has created a new dualism where he's divine and everything else is separate from that, which John can give us a little bit of that impression, right? This is a Jesus who is embodying fully both, and being tortured and killed doesn't lead to, doesn't he doesn't walk through that untouched. He walks through it horribly. Um, and again, the great contribution of Christianity is that is divine in the world at the same time. That's non-dual, non-dual in the midst of suffering and death. Um, so, well, I mean, this is the embodiment of what is always coming for us, but in every moment as well. Um, and then what we have after are, some of the mythological tellings of Jesus's divinity, shining through. Um, but I don't want to miss, right, that, the huge mythological message here of Jesus's humanity in the midst of the divinity, right? The non-dual coming together of it in torture and death. Um, that's our lives all the time, all the way to the end. And what a contribution of this wisdom tradition, right, to our own realization, our own understanding of that. If we have eyes to see, as the Gospels say, to just pointing directly, past the mind, past all the machinations we come up with about how to get around it, and saying, this is what is for you and for everything, everyone else, and for everything to come.